I watched through the blurry windshield as my expensive weatherproof car cover disappeared down the street, stolen right off my Tesla during the worst snowstorm Michigan had seen in years. And I knew exactly who took it, because my dashcam had recorded everything with crystal clarity, including the HOA president's distinctive silver Lexus SUV with its vanity plates. My name is Oliver Thompson, and I had been living in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision in Grand Rapids for exactly 8 months when this whole nightmare started. I bought my 3-bedroom colonial in June of last year, drawn by the mature trees, well-maintained sidewalks, and what seemed like a friendly neighborhood. The HOA fees were steep at $450 a quarter, but the realtor assured me it was worth every penny for the amenities and upkeep. What she did not tell me was that the HOA president, a woman named Patricia Henderson, ran the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom and had a particular hatred for electric vehicles. The first time I met Patricia was at the mandatory new homeowner orientation in July. She was exactly what you would expect from someone who spends their entire existence micromanaging other people's lives. Mid-50s, blonde hair cut in that specific Karen bob that seems to be issued along with the attitude, and a permanent expression like she had just smelled something unpleasant. She wore a cream-colored blazer with shoulder pads that belonged in the 80s and carried a leather-bound binder that I would later learn contained every single HOA violation she had documented over her 7-year reign. Electric vehicles, she had said during my orientation, her lips pursed so tight they practically disappeared, are a contentious issue in Meadowbrook Heights. Some residents feel they lower property values. I had laughed, thinking she was joking. She was not joking. Mrs. Henderson, electric vehicles are the future. They actually increase property values in most studies. Her expression had frozen into something between a smile and a snarl. That may be true in California, Mr. Thompson, but here in Michigan we have standards, traditional values. I'll be watching to ensure your vehicle doesn't become an eyesore. I should have seen the warning signs then. I should have turned around and put my house back on the market. But I had just started a new job as a software engineer at a startup downtown, and I was tired of moving. I had lived in 7 different cities over the past decade, and I wanted to settle down, plant some roots, maybe finally get that dog I had been promising myself. The harassment started small. A violation notice because my Tesla was parked 3 inches over the edge of my driveway onto the sidewalk. Another notice because I had washed my car on a Sunday, which apparently violated some obscure clause about quiet hours. Then a written warning because my garage door was left open for 20 minutes while I unloaded groceries. Each notice came with a threat of fines, each one more ridiculous than the last. I tried to play nice. I attended HOA meetings, I smiled and nodded. I followed every single ridiculous rule in their 47-page covenant document. But Patricia had decided I was her enemy, and nothing I did would change that. The situation escalated in November when the HOA board, which was essentially just Patricia and 2 of her friends who rubber-stamped whatever she wanted, passed a new rule requiring all vehicles parked outside overnight to be covered with aesthetically appropriate car covers in neutral tones. The rule was clearly targeted at me since I was the only person in the neighborhood who regularly parked outside. My garage was full of moving boxes I still had not unpacked, and my woodworking equipment. I spent $280 on a high-quality weatherproof car cover in a tasteful gray that matched my house's siding. It fit perfectly over my Model 3, protecting it from the elements and supposedly satisfying Patricia's bizarre aesthetic requirements. For 3 weeks, everything was fine, Then the snowstorm hit. It started on a Tuesday evening in mid-January. The weather forecast had been warning about it for days, calling it a potential historic event with accumulations of 18 to 24 inches and wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Everyone was preparing, stocking up on groceries, and making sure their snow blowers were ready. I had charged my Tesla to full capacity, knowing that the cold would reduce its range, and I had carefully secured my car cover with the integrated straps and buckles. I also had my dashcam running. I had installed it months ago after Patricia had accused me of blocking her driveway, which I absolutely had not done. The camera ran continuously when the car was parked, triggered by motion sensors, and stored footage on a high-capacity SD card. It had already saved me twice from false violation notices. The snow started falling around 6 in the evening. By midnight, we had over a foot on the ground, and it showed no signs of stopping. I was working from home the next day, obviously, and I went to bed listening to the wind howl against my windows. I woke up around 8 in the morning to a winter wonderland. Everything was buried under nearly 2 feet of pristine white snow. The streets were completely impassable, and the city had declared a snow emergency. I made coffee, settled in at my home office, and figured I would dig out my car later when the plows came through. Around 10:30, I glanced out my front window to check on the snow depth. That was when I noticed my car cover was gone. At first, I thought maybe the wind had blown it off, but that did not make sense. The cover was designed for exactly these conditions, and I had secured it properly. I pulled on my boots and coat and trudged out into the knee-deep snow to investigate. The car cover was completely missing. Not blown into a snowbank nearby, not tangled in the tree branches overhead, just gone. And here is the thing that immediately told me this was not an accident. Someone had brushed off most of the snow that had accumulated on top of the cover before removing it. You could see the brush marks in the remaining dusting of powder on my Tesla's roof and hood. Someone had deliberately stolen my car cover during a blizzard. I was standing there in the freezing cold, snow blowing into my face, trying to process this absurdity when my neighbor Dennis came out to shovel his driveway. "Can you believe this weather?" he called over. "Dennis, did you see anyone near my car this morning?" He shook his head, packing snow with his shovel. "Been inside since yesterday evening." "Why?" "Someone stole my car cover." Dennis stopped shoveling and stared at me. "During the snowstorm." Who would do that? We both knew the answer, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. Dennis was in his 60s, retired from the automotive industry, and he had lived in Meadowbrook Heights for 20 years. He had seen Patricia drive out 3 different families with her constant harassment. "You should check your dashcam," he suggested quietly. I trudged back inside, brushed off the snow, and pulled up the dashcam footage on my laptop. The camera had multiple motion-activated recordings from the night. Most were just snow falling or the wind shaking tree branches. But then I found it. At 7:42 in the morning, while it was still dark and snowing heavily, a silver Lexus SUV pulled up in front of my house. The headlights illuminated the falling snow, and I could see it was still coming down hard. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Patricia Henderson, bundled up in a puffy winter coat and wearing snow boots. The footage was remarkably clear. My dashcam was a high-end model with night vision and image stabilization. I watched as Patricia waded through the snow to my car, pulled out a snow brush from under her coat, and began brushing off the accumulated snow from the car cover. It took her several minutes, and she kept looking around nervously, probably checking if anyone was watching. Once she had cleared enough snow, she unbuckled the straps holding the cover in place. The wind caught it immediately, and she struggled to wrestle it under control, eventually bundling it into a bulky mass. She carried it back to her Lexus, shoved it into the back, and drove away. The whole thing took maybe 8 minutes, and her license plate was perfectly visible in the footage. It was a vanity plate that read HOA Pries in bold letters, because of course it was. I sat back in my chair, absolutely stunned by what I had just watched. This was not just petty harassment anymore. This was theft. She had stolen my property during a blizzard, probably thinking the snowstorm would cover her tracks. I immediately saved multiple copies of the footage to different drives and cloud storage. Then I called the non-emergency police line. Grand Rapids Police, how can I help you? Hi, I need to report a theft. My car cover was stolen from my vehicle during the snowstorm this morning, and I have dashcam footage of the person who took it. The dispatcher took down my information and told me an officer would come by when road conditions improved, probably later that afternoon. In the meantime, she advised me to preserve all evidence and not confront the suspect. That last part was going to be difficult because about 30 minutes later my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Patricia Henderson standing on my porch, snow still falling behind her. She was holding a clipboard, naturally. I took a deep breath, reminded myself to stay calm, and opened the door. "Mr. Thompson," she said in that syrupy sweet voice she used when she was about to deliver bad news. "I'm doing wellness checks on all residents during this snow emergency, making sure everyone has power and heat." "I'm fine, thanks for checking." She did not leave. Instead, she craned her neck, trying to see past me into my house. "I noticed your car is parked outside without a cover. That's a violation of HOA Covenant Section 12.4. You'll be receiving a written notice and a $50 fine." The audacity was breathtaking. She stole my car cover and was now citing me for not having it. "My car cover was stolen this morning," I said, keeping my voice level. "During the snowstorm. I've reported it to the police." Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, or calculation. "How unfortunate. Well, regardless of the circumstances, the covenant is clear. Your vehicle must be covered when parked outside overnight. Even if someone steals the cover, you're responsible for your property, Mr. Thompson. Perhaps you should park in your garage like a responsible homeowner. My garage is full. Then I suggest you make space. You have 48 hours to remedy this violation before the fine increases to $100. She made a note on her clipboard with a flourish. I was about to respond when I saw a police cruiser turning onto our street, its lights on but no siren. Patricia saw it too, and her expression tightened. "Is that for you?" she asked. "I told you I reported the theft to the police." The cruiser pulled up in front of my house and Officer Martinez stepped out. He was a young guy, probably early 30s, and he looked tired from what had probably been a brutal shift dealing with the snowstorm. "Mr. Thompson," he called. "That's me." Patricia tried to slip away, but Officer Martinez noticed her. "Madam, please stay. I may need to ask you some questions." "I have other wellness checks to complete," she said stiffly. "This will only take a moment." I invited Officer Martinez inside, and Patricia reluctantly followed, standing in my entryway with her arms crossed like I was the one causing problems. I explained the situation, showed him the dashcam footage on my laptop, and provided him with Patricia's license plate number, which of course matched the one in the video. Officer Martinez watched the footage twice, his expression growing more serious. "Mrs. Henderson, is that your vehicle in this footage?" "I don't have to answer that without a lawyer present," Patricia snapped. "Madam, I'm just asking a simple question. Is that your Lexus with the plate HOA Pries?" Patricia's face was turning red. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I've been home all morning dealing with the snow emergency. The timestamp on this footage says 7:42 this morning, and that's clearly you getting out of that vehicle. That could be anyone. It's dark and snowy. Officer Martinez zoomed in on the footage, and Patricia's face was clearly visible in several frames when she turned toward the camera. "Mrs. Henderson, I can see your face, and your vanity plate is right there." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's mouth opened and closed several times like a fish gasping for air. "I was confiscating contraband," she finally said. "Mr. Thompson's car cover violated HOA aesthetic guidelines. It was not the approved shade of gray." "It was the exact shade specified in the covenant," I interjected. "I checked 3 times before buying it. The HOA board determined it was unacceptable. When? I never received any notice about that." Officer Martinez held up his hand. "Regardless of any HOA dispute, you can't just take someone's property, Mrs. Henderson. That's theft." "It's not theft if I'm enforcing HOA rules." "Yes, madam, it actually is. The HOA has legal procedures for dealing with covenant violations. Taking someone's property without notice or due process is theft, plain and simple." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue more, but something in Officer Martinez's expression must have warned her she was only digging herself deeper. "Where is the car cover now?" he asked. "I don't have it," Patricia said quickly. "The footage shows you putting it in your vehicle." "I disposed of it properly, as is my right as HOA president when confiscating non-compliant items." Officer Martinez sighed and closed his notebook. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm going to issue you a citation for petty theft. The value of the item is under $1,000, so it's a misdemeanor. You'll receive a court date in the mail. I strongly suggest you return Mr. Thompson's property before this escalates further. I told you, I disposed of it. Then you may want to consult with an attorney about restitution." Patricia snatched the citation from Officer Martinez's hand, shot me a look of pure venom, and stormed out of my house. Through the window, I watched her struggle through the snow back to her own house, 3 doors down. "She's going to make your life miserable," Officer Martinez said quietly after she left. "She already does. Document everything. Every interaction, every violation notice, every HOA meeting. People like her don't stop until someone forces them to stop." He was right, of course. But I had not anticipated just how vindictive Patricia would become. The next day, after the streets were finally plowed, I received 5 separate violation notices slipped under my door. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My house numbers were a 1/4 inch too large according to Patricia's measurements. My driveway had not been shoveled within the required 6-hour window after the snow stopped, even though the city had issued a snow emergency and told everyone to stay home. My doormat was not centered properly. And my Tesla was still uncovered, so that fine had indeed increased to $100. Each notice was printed on official HOA letterhead and signed by Patricia and the 2 other board members, Susan Carmichael and Janet Reynolds. I had met them briefly at HOA meetings, and they seemed like nice enough women, but they were completely under Patricia's thumb. I scanned all the notices and emailed them to my attorney friend, Marcus, who lived in Detroit. "This is harassment," he wrote back. "She's clearly retaliating because you got her cited for theft. You need to fight this." "How?" "Start by demanding a hearing with the full HOA board for each violation. They're required to give you due process before imposing fines. Then file a complaint with the Michigan Attorney General's office. HOAs are regulated, and this kind of retaliation is illegal." I spent the rest of the week preparing. I took time-stamped photographs of my mailbox, which was identical to every other mailbox on the street and definitely the correct shade of black, according to the covenant specifications. I measured my house numbers, which were exactly the size specified in the guidelines. I pulled weather reports and the city's snow emergency declaration, showing that no one could have reasonably shoveled within 6 hours of the snow stopping. I took photos of everyone's doormats, none of which were perfectly centered. The car cover issue was trickier. Technically, I was in violation because I did not have a cover on my car, but that was only because Patricia had stolen it. Marcus advised me to buy a new cover and submit a demand letter to the HOA for reimbursement of the original cover plus the fines. I ordered another cover, this time from a different company and in a slightly different shade of gray that was still within the covenant specifications. I was not giving Patricia any ammunition. The new cover arrived Friday, and I installed it carefully, taking photographs of every step to document that it was properly secured and the correct color. Then I drafted a formal demand letter to the HOA board requesting reimbursement for the stolen cover, cancellation of all retaliatory fines, and a written apology from Patricia. I sent copies to all 3 board members via certified mail and email. Patricia's response arrived Monday morning. It was not what I expected. "Dear Mr. Thompson," it began, in formal typewritten text. "The Meadowbrook Heights HOA Board of Directors has received your demand letter dated January 20th. After careful review and consultation with our attorney, the board denies all of your requests. Furthermore, the board has determined that your repeated violations of HOA covenants and your hostile attitude toward board members constitute a pattern of behavior detrimental to the community. Pursuant to Section 31 of the covenants, the board hereby places you under enhanced monitoring status. Any future violations will result in immediate fines up to $500 per day. Additionally, your voting privileges in HOA matters are suspended pending a review hearing. You have the right to request this hearing within 30 days. Sincerely, Patricia Henderson, HOA President." I read the letter 3 times, my anger building with each pass. Enhanced monitoring status, suspended voting rights. This was insane. I called Marcus immediately. "They can't do that," he said after I read him the letter. "I mean, technically the covenant might allow for monitoring and suspension of voting rights, but not as retaliation. This is textbook harassment. You need to sue them. I just want to live in my house in peace." "I know, man. But sometimes peace requires going to war first. Let me make some calls. I know a good attorney in Grand Rapids who specializes in HOA disputes." That attorney was Rebecca Chang, and when I met with her Wednesday afternoon, she was furious on my behalf before I even finished explaining the situation. "This is the 3rd case I've taken against Patricia Henderson in the last 2 years, Rebecca said, pulling out a thick file. "She's been sued twice before by other homeowners. Both cases settled before trial, but she had to personally pay damages in one of them. The woman is a nightmare. Can she really suspend my voting rights? Not like this." The covenant allows for suspension in cases of serious repeated violations or criminal behavior, neither of which applies to you. Having your car cover stolen is not a violation. Questioning the board's authority is not grounds for suspension. This is pure retaliation for getting her cited for theft. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to file suit against the HOA and Patricia personally for harassment, retaliation, and violation of your rights under the HOA covenant and Michigan law. We're also going to demand an emergency injunction preventing her from imposing any further fines or sanctions against you pending resolution of the lawsuit. This is going to get ugly, Oliver. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it. I thought about just selling my house and leaving, letting Patricia win. But then I thought about Dennis and the other neighbors who had suffered under her tyranny for years. I thought about the families she had driven away. Someone had to stand up to her. I'm ready. We filed the lawsuit on Friday. By Monday morning, the entire neighborhood knew about it. I learned this because Dennis came over with coffee and a grim expression. Patricia's been going door to door telling everyone you're trying to destroy the HOA, he said. She's claiming you're going to bankrupt the association with legal fees and everyone's dues will triple. That's not how this works. I know that. You know that. But half the neighborhood doesn't understand HOA law. She's scared, Oliver. A cornered animal is dangerous. He was right to warn me. That afternoon, I came home from running errands to find someone had spray-painted HOA killer on my driveway in bright red letters. I immediately called the police and took photographs from every angle. Officer Martinez responded again, along with his partner, a woman named Officer Stevens. They documented the vandalism and checked with neighbors to see if anyone had security cameras that might have caught the perpetrator. Mrs. Henderson was home all afternoon, Dennis told the officers. But I saw Susan Carmichael's car parked on the street for about 20 minutes around 2. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Susan Carmichael was one of Patricia's board cronies. Officer Stevens went to talk to her while Officer Martinez took my statement. "Have you considered moving?" he asked me quietly while his partner was gone. "Every day." "But I shouldn't have to run from a bully." "No, you shouldn't. But this is going to get worse before it gets better." Officer Stevens returned with Susan Carmichael, who was crying and protesting that she had not done anything. But there was red spray paint on her hands that she had not cleaned off properly. "I was just sending a message," Susan sobbed. "He's ruining everything. Patricia said he's going to destroy our neighborhood." "By suing the HOA for harassment?" Officer Stevens asked. "The legal fees are going to bankrupt us. Our dues are going to skyrocket." "That's not Mr. Thompson's fault, madam. That's the board's fault for engaging in illegal behavior." Susan was cited for vandalism and criminal mischief. Officer Martinez told me I could press for full charges, or let her off with a warning if she agreed to clean up the spray paint and pay for professional driveway cleaning if needed. I was about to agree to the warning when Patricia herself came marching down the street, red-faced and furious. "Susan, don't say another word. This is entrapment, police harassment. Mrs. Henderson, please step back," Officer Stevens said calmly. "You're targeting my board members because of a personal vendetta. This is corruption." "Madam, your board member just admitted to vandalizing Mr. Thompson's property. That's a crime. She was exercising her free speech rights. Spray painting someone's driveway is not protected speech." The argument escalated from there, with Patricia becoming increasingly unhinged until Officer Martinez finally told her to go home or she would be cited for obstruction. She left, but not before promising that this was far from over. Susan ended up being charged because Patricia's outburst had killed any goodwill I might have felt toward letting her off easy. She cleaned the spray paint off my driveway the next day, crying the whole time while Patricia watched from her porch like a general surveying a battlefield. The HOA lawsuit moved forward. Rebecca filed the emergency injunction, and we got a court date for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Patricia continued her campaign of harassment. I received violation notices for things that were not even in the covenant. My grass was too long, even though it was January and completely covered in snow. My garbage cans were visible from the street for more than the allowed 2 hours, even though pickup was delayed due to weather. My car was parked facing the wrong direction in my own driveway. Each notice was more ridiculous than the last, and I documented everything. Rebecca was building an airtight case. The injunction hearing was held on a Thursday morning in early February. The courthouse was downtown, a stately building that made me nervous just walking into it. I had never been involved in a lawsuit before, and despite Rebecca's confidence, I felt like I was in over my head. Patricia showed up with the HOA's attorney, a tired-looking man named Gerald Strickland, who seemed like he had handled one too many of these cases. We all sat in the courtroom waiting for the judge, and Patricia stared daggers at me the entire time. Judge Margaret Foster entered, and we all stood. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that looked like they could see right through any nonsense. I liked her immediately. Rebecca presented our case first, laying out the timeline of harassment, the car cover theft, the retaliatory fines, and Susan's vandalism. She showed the dashcam footage, which played on a screen for the whole courtroom to see. She presented all the violation notices and highlighted the absurdity of each one. "Your Honor, this is a clear pattern of harassment and retaliation," Rebecca concluded. "Mr. Thompson is being targeted not because he has violated any legitimate HOA rules, but because he dared to file a police report when the HOA president stole his property. We're requesting an immediate injunction preventing the HOA from imposing any further fines or sanctions against Mr. Thompson until this matter can be fully litigated." Gerald Strickland stood to present the HOA's defense. He looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor, while there may have been some miscommunication between the parties, the HOA board was acting within its authority to enforce community standards. The car cover issue was a legitimate aesthetic concern, and Mrs. Henderson may have been overzealous in her enforcement, but there was no theft. She was confiscating non-compliant property as the covenant allows. The covenant allows board members to enter private property and take personal belongings without notice or due process." Judge Foster asked, her tone skeptical. "In cases of egregious violations, yes, Your Honor. A car cover being the wrong shade of gray is egregious. It violated the aesthetic standards the community has maintained for years." Judge Foster looked down at the papers in front of her. "I've read the covenant. It specifies neutral-toned covers in gray, beige, or black. Mr. Thompson's cover was gray. Where's the violation?" Gerald Strickland shuffled his papers. "The board has discretion to determine compliance." "Not unlimited discretion, Counselor. And certainly not discretion to take someone's property without due process." She turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Henderson, where is Mr. Thompson's car cover now?" Patricia stood, smoothing her jacket. "I disposed of it, Your Honor. It was my duty as HOA president to remove non-compliant items from the community. You threw away someone's $300 car cover because you decided it was the wrong shade of gray. I was protecting property values." "By stealing," Judge Foster's voice had taken on an edge. "Mrs. Henderson, I've reviewed your history as HOA president. This is not the first time you've been accused of overreach. In fact, there are 2 prior lawsuits that were settled before trial. You personally paid damages in one of them. Why are you still engaging in this behavior?" Patricia's face flushed red. "I am trying to maintain standards in my community, Your Honor. Mr. Thompson moved in and immediately began flouting our rules. His electric vehicle is an eyesore. He parks outside instead of using his garage like a civilized person. He questions every decision the board makes. He's divisive and hostile. He filed a legitimate police report after you stole his property. That's not hostile, that's appropriate. He's trying to destroy our HOA with this frivolous lawsuit." Judge Foster held up her hand. "Mrs. Henderson, sit down. I've heard enough." The courtroom went silent. Judge Foster took off her glasses and looked at both parties. I'm granting the injunction. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA is hereby prohibited from imposing any fines, sanctions, or penalties against Oliver Thompson pending resolution of this lawsuit. Furthermore, all current fines against Mr. Thompson are suspended. Mrs. Henderson, you are personally prohibited from contacting Mr. Thompson directly for any reason. All HOA communications must go through Mr. Strickland and Miss Chang. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt of court. Do you understand? Patricia looked like she had been slapped. Your Honor, I have a duty to enforce the covenants. You can enforce them against every other homeowner. You're staying away from Mr. Thompson. The pattern of harassment documented here is clear and concerning. In fact, I'm ordering an audit of all HOA activities for the past year. I want to see every violation notice issued, every fine imposed, and every board decision made. Something tells me Mr. Thompson is not the only homeowner you've targeted. Gerald Strickland looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Your Honor, that's very irregular. So is an HOA president stealing residents' property during a blizzard. The audit will be conducted by a court-appointed examiner at the HOA's expense. This hearing is adjourned. Rebecca and I walked out of the courthouse into the cold February air, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. That went well, Rebecca said with a satisfied smile. She looked like she wanted to kill me. She's been getting away with this behavior for years. No one's ever held her accountable. Judge Foster sees right through her. What happens now? Now we wait for the audit. If it shows what I think it will show, we'll have enough evidence to force Patricia off the board entirely. In the meantime, you're protected. She can't touch you. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. But Rebecca's warning echoed in my mind. A cornered animal is dangerous. That weekend, I attended the monthly HOA meeting. I had every right to be there, despite Patricia's attempt to suspend my voting privileges. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that mostly sat empty except for these meetings. About 40 residents showed up, which was a good turnout. Word had spread about the lawsuit and the injunction, and people were curious. I took a seat in the back next to Dennis, who had brought his wife, Martha. This should be interesting, Dennis whispered. Patricia called the meeting to order. She looked composed, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She went through the usual agenda items, discussing snow removal expenses, upcoming spring landscaping bids, and a proposal to repaint the community center. Then she got to what she really wanted to talk about. As many of you know, one of our residents has filed a lawsuit against the HOA. Her eyes flicked to me. This lawsuit is frivolous and designed to undermine the board's authority. Legal fees will likely exceed $20,000, which may require a special assessment on all homeowners. Murmurs of concern rippled through the room. That's not true, I said, standing up. The lawsuit is a response to months of harassment and retaliation. You're out of order, Mr. Thompson. You don't have speaking privileges. Actually, Judge Foster reinstated all my privileges when she granted the injunction. Patricia's face went red. That injunction is temporary and based on misleading information. It's based on dashcam footage showing you stealing my car cover during a snowstorm. The room exploded with conversation. Several people turned to stare at Patricia, who looked like she was going to have a stroke. You were enforcing HOA rules, she shouted. I was enforcing HOA covenants, she corrected herself. Mr. Thompson's cover violated our aesthetic standards. Then why didn't you send a violation notice first? Someone called out. It was a woman named Helen who lived on my street. That's how it's supposed to work, right? Notice, hearing, then penalties. The violation was egregious enough to warrant immediate action. It was gray car cover, I said. The covenant requires gray car covers. I bought it specifically to comply with your rules. More murmurs. Patricia was losing control of the room. You're all being manipulated, she said desperately. Mr. Thompson wants to destroy everything we've built here. He wants to turn this neighborhood into a parking lot for electric vehicles. He doesn't respect our traditions or our values. I just want to live in my house without being harassed, I said calmly. I follow the rules. I pay my dues. All I ask is to be treated fairly. Dennis stood up. I've lived here for 20 years. I've watched Patricia drive away good families because they didn't meet her personal standards. The Johnsons left after she fined them $5,000 for planting the wrong kind of tree. The Martinez left after she tried to force them to paint their house a different color, even though it was within covenant specifications. How many more people have to leave before we admit there's a problem? Several people nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Susan Carmichael, who had spray-painted my driveway, sat with her arms crossed and refused to make eye contact with anyone. Patricia tried to regain control. Those families left for unrelated reasons, and their violations were serious. So serious that both lawsuits settled with the HOA paying damages. Dennis shot back. I pulled the records, Patricia. We've paid out over $70,000 in settlements over the past 3 years. That's where our dues are going, not to landscaping or snow removal, to covering your mistakes. The room erupted again. Patricia banged her gavel, but no one was listening anymore. People were arguing, asking questions, demanding answers. Janet Reynolds, the other board member who usually rubber-stamped everything Patricia wanted, stood up and walked out without saying a word. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Patricia tried to adjourn officially, but people ignored her and started having their own conversations. Small groups formed, discussing what Dennis had revealed. Several people came up to me to express support or apologize for not speaking up sooner. I left feeling hopeful for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Maybe the community was finally waking up to what Patricia had been doing. The court-appointed audit took 3 weeks. The examiner was a retired attorney named Robert Caldwell who specialized in HOA law. He requested access to all HOA records, including meeting minutes, financial statements, violation notices, and correspondence. Patricia fought him every step of the way, but Judge Foster made it clear she would be held in contempt if she did not cooperate fully. When the audit report was released in early March, it was devastating for Patricia. Robert Caldwell had found systematic abuse of authority spanning Patricia's entire 7-year tenure as president. She had issued over 300 violation notices, with a disproportionate number going to specific homeowners who had questioned her authority or failed to vote for her preferred board candidates. She had imposed over $150,000 in fines over 7 years, though only about $60,000 had actually been collected. The rest had either been successfully appealed or the homeowners had sold their houses and left. Most damning, Caldwell found that Patricia had used HOA funds to pay her personal attorney fees in prior lawsuits without board approval. She had also hired her brother-in-law's landscaping company for community maintenance at rates significantly higher than market value. That was essentially embezzlement. The report recommended immediate removal of Patricia from the board, a full forensic audit of HOA finances, and potential criminal investigation for misuse of funds. Rebecca called me as soon as she read the report. We won. This is everything we needed and more. Patricia is done. What happens now? The HOA has to hold an emergency meeting to address the audit findings. Patricia will almost certainly be removed from the board. You'll probably get full reimbursement for everything, and we can negotiate a settlement for your damages. But Oliver, there's more. The forensic audit might reveal criminal activity. If she's been embezzling HOA funds, that's serious. The emergency meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday. Every homeowner in Meadowbrook Heights received a copy of the audit report along with the meeting notice. The community center was packed. People were standing along the walls because there were not enough seats. Patricia arrived with Gerald Strickland. She looked terrible, like she had not slept in days. Susan Carmichael was there too, sitting as far from Patricia as possible. Janet Reynolds had resigned from the board entirely. An attorney from the management company that handled HOA administrative tasks ran the meeting since the board was essentially defunct. He was a middle-aged man named Thomas Wright, and he looked deeply uncomfortable. "We're here to address the findings of the court-ordered audit," Thomas began. "The report has identified serious issues with HOA governance over the past 7 years. The board has been removed pending a full investigation and new elections." Patricia stood up. "This is illegal." "You can't remove the board without a vote. Mrs. Henderson, please sit down. The management company has the authority to remove board members for cause pending resolution of serious allegations. You've been accused of financial misconduct and abuse of authority. You're welcome to defend yourself when we open the floor for comments, but right now you need to sit down." Patricia sat, but she looked like she wanted to explode. Thomas went through the audit findings point by point. People gasped when they heard about the embezzlement. Someone shouted, "Call the police." When he described Patricia paying her personal legal fees with HOA funds, by the time he finished, Patricia was pale and shaking. "Mrs. Henderson, would you like to make a statement?" Thomas asked. She stood slowly. "Everything I did was for this community. Every decision I made was to protect our property values and maintain our standards. I have given 7 years of my life to this neighborhood, and this is how you repay me. By believing lies and false accusations from some outsider who's been here less than a year." She pointed at me. "He's destroyed everything. Before he arrived, we had order. We had standards. Now look at you all turning on each other, questioning everything. This is what he wanted, to create chaos and division. You stole his car cover during a blizzard," someone shouted. "I was enforcing the rules." "You embezzled HOA funds," someone else yelled. "I did no such thing. Those were legitimate expenses." Thomas held up his hand for quiet. "Mrs. Henderson, the audit is clear. You used HOA funds for personal expenses without authorization. That's embezzlement. The management company is turning this matter over to law enforcement." Patricia's legs seemed to give out and she dropped back into her chair. Gerald Strickland leaned over to whisper something to her, but she pushed him away. "I want to speak," Dennis said, standing up. "I've lived here 20 years. I've watched Patricia turn this neighborhood into her personal dictatorship. Good people have left because she made their lives miserable. Families who did nothing wrong were fined into bankruptcy. And we all let it happen because we were afraid of becoming her next target. Well, I'm not afraid anymore. She needs to go. She needs to face consequences, and we need to rebuild this community the right way." Applause broke out. Others stood to share their own stories of Patricia's harassment. A man named Richard described how Patricia had fined him for parking his work van in his driveway, even though he had a disability placard, and needed his vehicle close to his house. A woman named Carol talked about being cited for having too many flowers in her garden because they were not on the approved plant list. The stories went on and on. Patricia sat through all of it, her face getting redder and redder. Finally, she stood up and walked out, ignoring Thomas's calls for her to stay. Gerald Strickland gathered his papers and hurried after her. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing next steps. An interim board would be appointed to handle immediate needs. New elections would be held within 60 days. The forensic audit would continue, and all findings would be shared with residents. And the management company would work with homeowners who had been unfairly fined to review and potentially reverse those violations. I left feeling like a weight had been lifted. It was not over yet, but justice was finally being served. 2 weeks later, Rebecca called with news. Patricia's been arrested. What? The forensic audit found she embezzled over $40,000 from the HOA over the past 3 years. The prosecutor charged her with embezzlement, theft by deception, and several other financial crimes. She's looking at potential prison time. I sat down heavily. I had wanted accountability, but the reality of criminal charges felt surreal. There's more, Rebecca continued. The prosecutor wants you to testify at her trial. The car cover theft is part of the case. It establishes a pattern of behavior. When's the trial? Probably not for several months. These things take time. But in the meantime, the HOA wants to settle your lawsuit. They're offering full reimbursement for all fines, the cost of both car covers, compensation for the damage to your driveway, and $25,000 for your pain and suffering. $25,000. It was not life-changing money, but it was vindication. Take it, I said. The settlement was finalized in April. I received a check and a formal written apology from the interim HOA board. They also voted to amend the covenants to prevent future abuse, including term limits for board members, required financial audits every year, and a clear appeals process for violation notices. Patricia's criminal trial was scheduled for July. In the meantime, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had put her house up for sale. She could not afford to stay, both financially and socially. Everyone knew what she had done. Susan Carmichael apologized to me in person, crying as she explained that Patricia had manipulated her into thinking I was the enemy. I accepted her apology. She was a victim too in a way, caught up in Patricia's toxic influence. The new HOA board was elected in May. Dennis ran for president and won easily. He immediately implemented reforms and reached out to homeowners who had left the neighborhood, apologizing on behalf of the community and inviting them back if they were interested. The trial itself was almost anticlimactic. Patricia's attorney tried to argue that she had made innocent bookkeeping errors, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forensic audit showed deliberate, systematic theft of HOA funds over years. Multiple homeowners testified about her harassment and abuse of authority. I testified about the car cover theft, and the dashcam footage was played for the jury. They convicted her on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison, though 18 months were suspended, meaning she would serve 1.5 years if she stayed out of trouble during probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, which amounted to over $40,000 plus interest. I did not attend the sentencing. By that point, I had moved on. My life in Meadowbrook Heights had finally become what I had hoped for when I bought my house. The new board was reasonable and focused on actual community improvement rather than petty enforcement. My neighbors were friendly now that they were not afraid of Patricia's retaliation. I finally unpacked my garage and could park my Tesla inside during bad weather, though I still used the car cover sometimes just because. Dennis stopped by one evening in late August with a bottle of wine to celebrate the end of the saga. "You did good," he said, sitting on my porch watching the sunset. "You could have just moved away, most people did, but you stood your ground." I just wanted to live in peace. Sometimes peace requires fighting for it. He raised his glass. To standing up to bullies. To standing up to bullies, I echoed. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching neighbors walk their dogs and kids ride bikes in the street. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to be. My phone buzzed with an email from the HOA. It was the monthly newsletter from Dennis, talking about the fall landscaping plans and reminding everyone about the Halloween decoration contest. Normal, boring HOA stuff. Exactly what it should be. I never saw Patricia again after the trial. I heard she moved to Florida after she got out of prison, starting over somewhere no one knew her history. I did not wish her ill, but I did not feel sorry for her either. She had made choices, and those choices had consequences. The car cover that Patricia stole never turned up. She probably threw it away like she said, or maybe she kept it as some kind of trophy until the legal walls closed in and she panicked. It did not matter. The replacement cover I bought worked just fine, and every time I put it on my car, I thought about how something as simple as a dashcam had brought down a tyrant. Life went on. I got that dog I had been wanting, a rescue mutt named Cooper who loved playing in the snow. I dated someone for a few months, but it did not work out, no hard feelings. My job was going well and I was up for a promotion. I joined the neighborhood book club and actually made friends. Normal life stuff. The lawsuit settlement money went into savings. Except for $2,000 I donated to a legal aid fund that helped homeowners fight HOA abuse. Rebecca told me there were thousands of people across the country dealing with situations like mine, and many could not afford attorneys. The fund helped level the playing field. 1 year after the car cover theft, in January of the following year, another snowstorm hit Grand Rapids. This one was not as bad as the first, only about 8 inches, but it was enough to make me think about that morning when I discovered my cover missing. I was inside working from home, watching the snow fall when my doorbell rang. It was a new neighbor, a young woman named Amanda who had moved in 3 houses down where Patricia used to live. She looked nervous. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Amanda Torres. I just moved in last month." Oliver Thompson. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks. I had a question. I bought a car cover for my Honda and I wanted to make sure it's okay with the HOA. I heard there was some issue with car covers before." I smiled. "What color is it?" "Gray." The tag said neutral tone approved. "You're fine. The HOA is under new management now. As long as you're following the basic covenant rules, no one's going to hassle you." She looked relieved. "Oh, good." The realtor mentioned something about the previous owner having legal trouble, but she was vague about details. The previous HOA president had some issues. But that's all resolved now. We have a good board. If you ever have questions or problems, just reach out to Dennis Murphy, the current president. He's great. "Thank you so much. I was worried I was moving into some nightmare HOA situation." "Not anymore. This is a good neighborhood now." After Amanda left, I thought about how much had changed in just 1 year. Patricia's reign of terror had ended, the community had healed, and new people were moving in without fear. The system had worked, slowly and imperfectly, but it had worked. That evening, I attended the monthly HOA meeting. Only about 15 people showed up, which Dennis said was normal now that there was not constant drama. The meeting lasted 30 minutes. Dennis covered the budget, discussed snow removal contractors for next year, and mentioned that the community center needed new chairs. People asked a few questions, everything was answered reasonably, and we all went home, boring. Perfect. Exactly what an HOA meeting should be. As I drove home that night, my new car cover secure over my Tesla in the garage, I reflected on everything that had happened. A stolen car cover during a snowstorm had been the catalyst for taking down a corrupt HOA president and reforming an entire community. If my dashcam had not caught Patricia in the act, if I had not stood up to her, if the judge had not taken the case seriously, things might have continued as they were for years. Sometimes the smallest acts of injustice reveal the biggest patterns of abuse. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. And sometimes justice actually prevails. I never forgot the morning I looked out my window and saw my car cover missing. I never forgot the shock of watching Patricia on my dashcam, stealing my property during a blizzard. But I also never forgot the feeling of watching Judge Foster grant the injunction, of seeing the audit report that validated everything I had said, of hearing my neighbors finally speak up after years of silence. The car cover was just a car cover, but the fight was about something much bigger. It was about the right to live in your own home without fear, the right to question authority when authority is wrong, the right to demand accountability from those in power. Patricia Henderson learned that no one is above the law, not even an HOA president with a vanity plate. The neighborhood learned that change is possible when people stand together. And I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. My Tesla sits in the garage now most nights, protected from the elements. But sometimes on clear nights, I park it in the driveway just because I can. And if I need to put the car cover on during bad weather, I do so without fear. Because the person who would have cited me for it, who would have stolen it out of spite, is gone. The neighborhood is quiet now. Normal. Boring. Beautiful, exactly as it should be.